Hi, welcome to the Anime Overanalysis by Anime Sibs, where we overanalyze all types of anime. This is part 1 of 2 videos that will cover the summary and the theories regarding the new Higurashi Onidamashi arc. In this video, I'll organize all the key events that happened in the new Higurashi Anime Go episodes 1 through 4 and highlight the differences that I noticed from the original Onikakushi chapter. Finally, I will end with the theory regarding Rena and some future plans going forward. First of all, this is not a remake. It's like a full-on sequel after the last events of the Matsurebashi from the original series. So spoiler warning, this will cover all the original Higurashi and up to episode 4 of the new Higurashi Go. I believe the author said this new series can be enjoyed by newcomers, but I don't think that means that it can be fully understood as a newcomer. And as some people have pointed out, the old-timers are looking from Rika's perspective with the full knowledge of all the past events, while the newcomers are viewing this from Keiichi's perspective. I wonder if the author intended this dichotomy to happen where the old-timers have to work together with the newcomers to solve the mystery together, similar to how in the original series, Rika has to work together with her friends to solve the mystery. And another perspective we can look out for is from Rena's perspective, given the assumption that she has already murdered Rina and Teipei as she has done in Sumihoroboshi. First, a quick recap of all the chapters I'll be mentioning in this. So Onikakushi is the first chapter of the original Higurashi series. Onidamashi is the current chapter in the new Higurashi Go series, which follows very similar events to the original Onikakushi, making the viewer think that this is a remake. And as I mentioned, Matsuribayashi is the final chapter, chapter 8 of the original series, where Rika works together with all of her friends to escape the endless loop she is in. And Sumihoroboshi is chapter 6, and it's the answer arc to the original Onikakushi chapter. And it focuses on Rena's struggle as she goes mad with the Hinamizawa syndrome and murders Rina, who's her father's lover, but she's only pretending to scam him out of his money, and Teipei, which is Satoko's uncle and also Rina's pimp. Okay, so the anime starts out in a similar fashion as the original Onikakushi series, where Keiichi is smashing the heads of Rena and Mion with a baseball bat, and it gives viewer the warning that this is not just a normal harem anime. Then it cuts to the calendar showing that it's Friday, June 10th of 1983, and this is a new addition that was done in the new anime, which makes me wonder if this is just done for the viewer's convenience or if there's a trick coming using the calendar in some way. Then Keiichi goes to school and introduces us to the cast of characters. In this scene, from left to right, it's Satoko, Rika, Keiichi, Mion, and Rena, conveniently color-coded for our sake. Then it cuts to June 12th, where they go out and have a picnic together. And even from here, there's a difference from the original, and I don't even know how people notice this, but in the original, they go out and have the picnic just one day after Keiichi comes back, which is June 11th as opposed to 12th. Then after the picnic, Rena and Keiichi go to the junkyard to hunt for treasures. And this is the first time Tomitake is introduced, who tells Keiichi about the dismembered body. When Keiichi asks Rena, she denies it in a pretty sus way. And the next day, on June 13th, Keiichi joins the club. But in the original, this happens before the picnic as opposed to after. Then on June 14th, for the first time, we see the calendar has a rip. And it's also raining outside. I think this must be foreshadowing something has happened on this day, which we're not sure yet, but I think it might be the day that Rena has killed Rina and Teipei. But I'm guessing we'll learn more about this in the answer arc. Then on June 15th, Keiichi goes to the junkyard for a second time and sees Rena there, and this happens on June 15th as opposed to June 13th in the original. When Keiichi calls her, Rena hesitates for a second before responding, as if she wants to hide something, instead of being just surprised in the original. And this part is actually similar to the original, but Rena is really surprised when Keiichi mentions the victim of the accident, and is relieved when Keiichi mentions Kentagun. And notice when Keiichi asks Rena where Kentagun is, she points away from the spot where she was at, which shows that she was there for something else. I'm suspecting that she was there to hide the bodies of Rina and Teipei. Also, when Keiichi says he wishes he had an axe, she says it's okay, unlike the original where she tells him to wait and leaves right away. And when she decides to leave, she tells him to stay right there, I'm suspecting so that the body wouldn't be discovered. After a while, Keiichi moves and finds a stack of magazines about a dismembered body. And when Rena comes back, she notices that Keiichi has moved and gets dead eyes. And this is outside of Keiichi's perspective. And then there's a scene added where Rika watches from afar. Then episode 2 starts with the scene of Rika and Hanyu talking. And in this scene, we can see that Rika has become a high schooler, but for some reason she died, and it has caused her to loop back to June of 1983. And it cuts back to the scene at the junkyard, where Rena comes back and gets in motion to strike Keiichi behind his back with an axe, and falls backwards when he screams. This is different from the original where she's just carrying it on her side. Also here, Rena comes back after the sunset as opposed to before in the original. And the next day on June 16th, after school, Rena asks Keiichi to go again to the junkyard. But when Keiichi offers to carry the axe, she refuses in a pretty suspicious way. Keiichi is helping Rena. There's a scene where Keiichi remembers his previous world, where he has killed Rena. After successfully taking out Kenta-kun, Keiichi asks Rena how they're gonna bring him home. And when Keiichi jokes again about how the limbs might fall off, he gets the dead-eye treatment again. And Rena goes to get the tools, which look like a tarp and a cart, which I'm kind of expecting that she prepared in order to hide the body. Then the next day on June 17th, Keiichi meets Tomitake for a second time with Rena and Mion. This is different from the original where only Mion is there, but in the old anime, both Rena and Mion are there too, so I'm not sure if this was intended. And here, a scene is added where Keiichi speculates about what Tomitake's real job is. When Keiichi mentions that he might be a spy or a detective, Mion starts laughing, but then the camera focuses on Rena, and she has a pretty serious face. Then on June 19th, the Watanagashi festival begins, and the group meets up with Tomitake, but unlike the original, he decides not to hang out with them and says something has come up. Then finally, the episode ends with Tomitake meeting up with Takano. Then episode 3 begins and Keiichi sees Tomitake at a distance talking with Takano, but decides not to talk with them. In the original, this is where Keiichi finds out about Oyashiro-sama's curse and Onikakushi, which is being spirited away by the demon, and all the past events that happened during Watanagashi Festival. Instead, we have a scene, again outside of Keiichi's perspective, where Rena is watching all of them from a distance. It might be to check if Keiichi is talking with Tomitake, who she might think is a detective now. Then the next day on June 20th, Keiichi is brought out to talk with the policeman Oishi, and he instead explains the curse to Keiichi. And here we find out, unlike the original where Tomitake was found dead by scratching his neck, and Takano was found dead by being burned inside a barrel, we find that they're both missing instead. And we also find out that their car and bikes are found near the festival area instead of near the body. From Rena's perspective, this might look like Keiichi talking to the police about her. And the next day on June 21st, Keiichi meets up with Oishi again after school at Angel Moat. In the original, this event happens on June 22nd instead of the June 21st. And also, unlike the original where Oishi feeds Keiichi suspicion about his friends, he instead defends them by saying that they probably didn't want to make him worry. The next day on June 22nd, we get the famous Usoda scene after school. When Keiichi asks Rena if she's hiding something, instead of saying, "Aren't you lying and keeping secrets from us?" she instead changes to, "Are you lying and hiding anything from me?" She continues to say that she knows what Keiichi did by saying that Keiichi hid something at the junkyard and was talking to the older man. And unlike the original, she continues saying that she worked really hard, which is what she says in Sumi Horoboshi after killing Rena and Teipei. This is at a part where her friends already find out about her murders. For sure, I think Rena suspects that Keiichi knows something. Then after coming home, Keiichi gets on a phone call with Oishi, and Oishi explains to Keiichi about Rena's past, unlike in the original where they were talking about Satoshi. And then Keiichi finds out that Rena was watching him from the back the whole time. And again, looking at it from Rena's perspective, Keiichi keeps mentioning her name while talking to someone who she thinks is the police. And her suspicions of Keiichi selling her out to the police are probably confirmed at this moment. After this, episode 4 begins the next day, June 23rd. And I think this is the first time we see the clock with the time and the date on it. And I wonder what the significance of this is. Being afraid of Rena, Keiichi says that he has a fever and goes to the clinic instead. Unlike the original where he gets treated by Irie, he instead sees people packing up the clinic. Then when Keiichi heads to school and talks about his fever, Rika notices it, and tells Keiichi that instead of doubting his friends, that he should doubt himself instead. When Keiichi gets home, he sees that his parents are not home, but gets a phone call from his mom saying that Rena is bringing dinner. And similar to the original, Rena comes to his house and Keiichi is afraid to open the door and hallucinates the scene from Onikakushi where Rena was trying to open the door. But after remembering the scene from the original where he didn't trust his friends and smashed their heads open, and along with the encouragement of Rika, he overcomes his fears and opens the door and hugs Rena. Then Rena tells Keiichi to watch TV while she brings the food to the kitchen. And just when you thought all is well, you see Rena's ominous face as she's placing her tools on the table. As they are talking, Keiichi sees the news about her body on TV and enters the kitchen to apologize. Instead finds Rena scratching her neck with a knife in her hand. She then talks about how she needs to protect her dad and will kill Keiichi and disappear to fulfill Orishiro-sama's curse this year. Then the fight between Keiichi and Rena starts, and as Keiichi is about to be stabbed, he pushes Rena into the table where she hits her head and looks like she's knocked out. But when he gets close, Rena gets up and starts stabbing Keiichi repeatedly while Keiichi tries to defend himself with the clock by hitting her on the head. At 8:24 p.m, the scene cuts to both of them lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and then it cuts out as Keiichi is lying there crying. This is probably the biggest twist in the new series and fits with the name Onidamashi, as the old viewers and Rika thought this was the Onikakushi route, like the original, where Keiichi goes mad and kills Rena and Shion, but instead it is Rena who goes mad and attacks Keiichi. And the scene cuts to Keiichi laying on the hospital bed, when the viewer probably thought he was dead for sure. And Oishi visits him to ask what happened, to which Keiichi replies that he remembers everything, but cannot tell him what happened because he doesn't understand. Afterwards, it shows Mion visiting Keiichi and him asking about what happened to Rena, to which Mion replies that they couldn't save her. And not only that, they found Rika and Satoko dead as well the day after, by being stabbed in the neck multiple times, and they're investigating if it is a suicide or not. Finally, the episode ends with the nurse asking if Keiichi's neck itches, and he starts scratching it while screaming. And a couple additional differences from the original are the surviving members. In Onikakushi, Keiichi, Mion, and Rena all die, while Rika and Satoko's fates are unknown. But in Onidamashi, Keiichi and Mion survive while everyone else is dead. Also in the original, Keiichi finds out about Satoshi, which feeds his suspicion, but in Onidamashi, Satoshi is not mentioned at all. That was a full recap of all the differences between the original Onikakushi and the new Onidamashi routes. And yet we have still a lot of questions that we still need answered, such as, was Keiichi hallucinating? And what happened to Tomitake and Takano? And who killed Rika and Satoko? And is Shihon the mastermind of all of this? For now, I'll only be answering one question. Did Rena actually kill Rina and Teppei in Onidamashi? We are certainly led to believe that she has, given what she says to Keiichi about protecting her dad, and a line where she says she worked hard for it. This is very similar to how she acts in Sumihoroboshi, where she murders Rina and Teppei. This, along with all the suspicious actions I mentioned in the summary, seems to leave little doubt. However, there is a chance that Rena is just imagining the murder as she is remembering her past from Sumihoroboshi due to the syndrome. This is similar to how Keiichi has his flashbacks from Onikakushi. There are a couple of things that made me think otherwise. First evidence is Rena's collection at her house. In episode 2, after Rena and Keiichi dig up Kentagon, they move it to her house. However, in the world where Rina moves into Rena's house, her dad remodels the house and throws away Rena's collection. The only times where this wouldn't be the case is if Rina is still alive and they haven't remodeled the house yet, or if Rena has killed Rina before this event. First probably is not the case given how Rena acts, and the second is possible, but this would mean that Rena has killed them before she has figured out about their scream. Another piece of evidence is from the ED, where we can find her dad living a life of a drunkard. And again in this picture, her house is not remodeled, which also wouldn't be the case if Rina moved in since her dad was able to get over the depression of the divorce. You might say that this picture doesn't represent her current state of the house. Given that Rena is holding the same bento box that she brought to Keiichi's house, I believe it is. Although it is possible that her dad went back to his habits after Rina died. I think this theory is interesting since it would better explain why Rena went crazy with that Takano's journal, since she wouldn't have been able to find the body that she thought she hid in the junkyard, making her think that Keiichi or the police already found it and moved it. Also, it is possible that she saw Rina and Teppei alive when she went to visit Okinomiya, which should have made her go even more crazy as she thought she had already killed him. This also would make sense on why Rika was focused on Keiichi rather than Rena, and thought that it was the Onikakushi route instead of the Sumihoroboshi route. If Rika was able to confirm that Rina and Teppei were alive. If this theory is true, then what has aided Rika in the past of Keiichi and Asaka's remembering their past has now turned against her, and she cannot rely on her past experiences to get her through this time. Anyway, that's it for today, and thank you for watching. And in part 2, I will go over the other lingering questions I mentioned before. And I'm also thinking about doing a full recap of the original Higurashi chapters, so that the old-timers like me can refresh their memories and the newcomers can get caught up. Also, I'm planning to add Japan Overanalysis videos on topics such as, why does Japan still use so much cash, and why Shinkansen is so expensive? So let me know what you guys want to see in the comments. Bye!